So, welcome everyone. And as usual, let's start by paying homage to our teachers, bringing our hearts to gratitude, bringing our hearts to a feeling of relaxed ease and awareness. Iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijjacharana sampanno sugato lokavidhu anuttaro purisa dhamma sarati satta deva manussa anang Buddho Bhagavati Savakapho Bhagavata Dhammo Samdittiko Akaliko Ehipasiko Opanayiko Pachatang Veditapho Vinyuhiti Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Ujupatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Nyaya Patipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Samyeji Patipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Yadidam Chattari Puri Sayugani Atta Purisa Pukkala Esa Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Aguneyo Paguneyo Dakkineyo Anjali Karaniyo Anuttarang Punyakyetam Lokasati. Okay, so welcome back to the final session of this four-part series on Introduction to Theravada Concepts. So let's jump right into it. So we'll start with an interactive discussion from the previous week. And then we'll talk about the Panya aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. We did Sila and Samadhi last week. This time we're doing Panya. So we'll talk a little bit about Sammaditthi, Samma Sankappa. Just touching on the kind of canonical explanation of it, but then more diving deeper into how we can personalize it, how it sits in our heart, what it means. So again, whatever I say, take them as suggestions. You really need to investigate within and see how it sits within, right? We'll also do a little bit of a historical piece, and we'll talk about samatha and vipassana and the kind of ongoing dialogue, ongoing um, discussion about these two methods of practices, which can be particularly important in the Theravadan context. Okay? So we'll talk about samatha and vipassana. We'll do vision, knowledge, and wisdom. Actually, I've ordered this wrong. Vision, knowledge, and wisdom should come before samatha and vipassana. And then finally, we'll do a guided meditation and the final closing. Okay. So, if anyone is interested and wants to share, last week we left off by doing a guided meditation using the Brahma Viharas. And we said, if you, over the week, along with your meditation, kind of look at how resistance arises. So if anyone wants to share, please feel free. Just raise your hand, and Ashley, who's very kindly agreed to be the tech host for today, will allow you to speak. Okay, I guess.
I can say something.
Sure. Yes, Vanessa.
I mean, it's not very. I can just tell you that there's been a lot of resistance in sitting this week. The weather has been so lovely. I want to sit outside in the sunshine, and so I leave it until too late in the day, and then I'm tired. And then I mean, really, I'm only just sharing that it has been difficult for me this week in terms of getting into it because and then I make all kinds of excuses for myself. I understand what's going on, but somehow I'm not winning the battle. Not this week, anyway.
Uh-huh.
So if you can give me any tips, I would certainly appreciate it.
Well, interesting choice of phrasing it. First observation or tip is that it's not a battle,
Mm.
right?
It feels
And
like it, though. It
sure,
feels like a battle.
that's the perception. That's the
Yeah.
perception. That's when we have to remind ourselves that it really isn't a battle. Really isn't a battle. It can seem difficult at times to kind of sit down. And so, what needs to be strengthened is probably commitment, but certainly the weight of approaching it or viewing it as a battle wouldn't be helpful, right? So
Mm.
just be a little more gentle with yourself. And sitting outside in the sunshine when the weather is good like this, we are in Canada, so we have to make hay while the sun shines. So give yourself some credit for that. And I would say definitely, even when you're sitting outside in the sunshine, right? Is it conducive to calming? Is it conducive to uplifting the heart, bringing brightness to the chitta? If that's the case, you're on the right track.
Oh,
Right?
it definitely is. I mean, I have a very nice little garden. It's very small, it's city garden, but it's full of trees and I can just sit there and look at nature,
Wonderful.
and it's very calming and I love it. I love to do that. But then I feel guilty that I'm actually, looking at the trees and watching them instead of going inside.
Well, why don't you make a deal with yourself that once the weather gets not so conducive to sitting outside, then you sit inside and close your eyes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So then, if there's no one else, let's move on. So the other thing I wanted to share, since we are talking about right view, start with a little anecdote. So when Lumpur Sumedho visited here, not the most recent time before that, this was his 80th birthday, Lumpur Viradhammo had a question for him. So his question was, what is right view? And quick as a flash, Lumpur Sumedho retorted, no view. So we'll try and explore that a little bit. And this is very interesting because it gets to the nub of it, right? Firstly, as we discussed, the word samma, so right view is sammaditi. So samma is not right versus wrong. If we do right versus wrong, we're still in the extremities of the pendulum, right? So we have to go back to the fulcrum. We have to go back to the point that makes these two positions possible. Lumpucha very famously said, and in many instances kept saying, right and wrong have equal value. So another thing for us to ponder, right? Right and wrong have equal value. And then, of course, in the Metta Sutta, in the last, towards the end, by not holding two fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from sense desires, is not born again into this world. So the emphasis is not having fixed views. Dittinja anupagamma, without holding on to fixed views, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit. But then there's a very nice comment I received from Karen after last week's class, and she said, the fulcrum of awareness avoids the trap of just one viewpoint alone. It sees and it understands. And I thought it was worth sharing because this statement encapsulates that piece really well. So basically, that is the job of Upekha. That is the job of the fourth Brahma, or the fourth aspect of the Brahma Viharas, right? Where it sees and it understands. It's just there as the witness. And it brings us back to the center. So as we veer left or veer right, it says, no, 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 come back, come back, come back to the center. So we don't get trapped in just one viewpoint. Then she continues, no wonder they use the word omniscience on the Buddha, not just all-seeing as in divine, but all-comprehending, which has a far deeper, compassionate resonance that implies, I see everything, feel everything. I am because you are because I am, right? So really well put, that this is not just about some kind of concept, which is the Brahma Vihara. It's about you and me. It's about how I react with the world. It's about the relationship I have with everything around me. So that's an excellent segue into the Panya aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. So there are two components of the Panya part of the Noble Eightfold Path, Sammaditthi and Samma Sankappa. Now, when we look at the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha's first teaching, he starts with Sammaditthi and Samma Sankappa. So he starts with the Panya aspect, then moves to Sila, then moves to Samadhi. And this is because Sammaditthi is what provides our kind of vision in life. It sets the direction, it sets the course, right? And sorry, again, I'm trying to move this taskbar. Yeah. So this is, if you look at it from the analogy of an organization, the mission statement or the vision would be Sammaditthi, and its guiding principles would be Samma Sankappa. Okay. So Sammaditthi, Samma, wholesome, aligned, attuned. Ditthi is view. In Sanskrit is drishti, Pali is Ditthi. And it gives us the broad layout of the path and where we have to go and how we have to walk. So in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, it's described as the knowledge of each of the Four Noble Truths. So dukkha jnanam, knowledge that yes, there is dukkha. Again, very, very specific. It's not my dukkha. It's not anyone else's dukkha. There is dukkha. So that needs to be unpacked, like we discussed earlier. Dukkha samudaya jnana. Awareness, knowledge of the fact that the suffering has a cause, has an origin. Dukkha nirodha jnana. Anything that has an origin is bound to end. So knowledge that there is a possibility of nirodha, possibility of that dukkha coming to an end. And finally, dukkha nirodha patipadaya jnana. Knowledge of the path that the Buddha prescribes that leads to the end of dukkha. Right? And as we said, I think probably in the first session or second session, I'm not sure. But when we were talking about the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, we said that the disease itself is avidya, right? The disease itself is the fact, avidya in Pali, avidya in Sanskrit, is the fact that we operate from a level of ignorance, right? That seems to be the beginning, that seems to be the starting point. And that's why when we look at the Paticca Samutpada, dependent co-arising, Pratitya Samutpada in Sanskrit, it starts with avidya or avidya. So, of that disease, which is avidya, the symptom is dukkha, right? And there's a cause for that symptom, there's an end to that symptom, and there's a prescription that the Buddha provides, which is the prescription that leads to the disappearance of that symptom, which in turn makes the disease disappear, right? They're both simultaneous. So when you say nibbana, or the cessation of avidya, or entering or being in a state of vidya, ending of suffering, all these things are synonymous. So this is the broad kind of vision. This is the mission statement. The Buddha doesn't stop there. He says, if you have a vision, it's not enough. You need to have factors that support the vision, right? And these he terms as samma sankalpa, samyak sankalpa in Sanskrit. So sankalpa is thinking, thought. So samma sankalpa is attuned thought, aligned thought. Attuned and aligned to what? Attuned and aligned to the ending of suffering, right? So whenever we say the samma, in terms of samma vacha, samma sankalpa, anything, samma samadhi, what is this alignment? What is this attunement? What are we aligning ourselves to? What are we attuning ourselves to? We are attuning ourselves towards the end of suffering. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. All right. So now the Buddha says, yes, to have this kind of proper, beneficial, helpful ways of thinking, always think of three aspects of life. First is nekkhamma sankalpa. Okay. And nekkhamma is usually translated as renunciation, but generally it just means not, it means kind of refraining from going to the senses all the time. Right? So if we look at the way we function, what is the worldview that we have? The worldview that we have is constantly fed, advised, informed, reinforced, strengthened by all of these sense doors. So I see something, I hear something, I smell something, I taste something, I touch something. This then informs me, I form a point of view. So with that experience, with that contact, there's consciousness. With that consciousness of contact, there arises sensation and the whole chain. Then there's perception. The whole chain kind of continues, right? Then there's a reaction to the perception, which is the sankhara. So nekkhamma basically is the promise we make to ourselves that instead of constantly going out through the sense doors, right? Is there some way of turning inward, right? So from a practical standpoint, yeah, it's fair enough to say it's renunciation. But then renunciation comes with such baggage, comes with such strong connotations. I have to renounce this, I have to renounce that. I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. If I'm not able to renounce this, I'm failing. If I'm not able to renounce this, I'm not progressing. and that becomes another. There's bhavatanha that comes in, vibhavatanha that comes in. So we're not escaping the trap, right? Another way, a wiser way, is just to say, hey, instead of constantly going out through the sense doors, why don't I just be inward focused? How do I look inside? How do I turn? That's why this really famous Thai forest teacher called Lumpu Dun, he gives a beautiful, his take on the Four Noble Truths is beautiful. He says, the mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going out is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the mind knowing the mind. Oh, hold on. I'm stuck. Yeah, the mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. Right? Beautifully put. Beautifully put. And then by approaching it that way, the mind going out is the cause. Yes, I can see that. And what happens when my mind goes out? It eventually leads in suffering, right? Because, if there's a pleasant sensation, I want more of it. If it's a pleasant experience, I grasp it. There's an unpleasant sensation, I want to push it away. If it's an unpleasant experience, I want to pull back. There's suffering, right? So the mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going out is suffering. The mind knowing the mind, nekama, instead of me operating through these sarayatana, through these 6 sense doors all the time, if I turn inwards, if I look inwards, that is the path. And the result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering, is the release that the path promises, right? So, nekama. Then the other one, it's not just enough if we do that, right? Because if we do that, then it's very easy for us to make an island of ourselves, right? This is me, I'm turned inwards, don't bother me, go away, right? I don't want to talk to you. I'm inward, I'm turned inward. There's a problem. No, that's not my problem. That's the problem of the world. That's the problem outside. I'm only focused inside. No. So along with nekama, what strengthens that and what gives it meaning is this idea of abhyapada. Abhyapajja, abhyapada, both are the same thing. And usually it's translated as non-ill will. But vyapada is basically just forming a separation, creating an alienation. Avyapada, not causing that alienation, not causing that separation. So what's the result? The result is there's no me and you. The principle is that there's just us, right? And, okay, so I'm looking inward and I'm not creating an alienation. I'm inclusive, I'm friendly, I'm open, I'm available. But then what is the motivation of doing all this? Well, the motivation is avihimsa. I will not cause harm. Right? And the Buddha, one of his first teachings when he has his Bhikkhu Sangha, says, Charata Bhikkhave Charikam, Bahujana Hitaya, Bahujana Sukhaya, Lokanukampaya. So, himsa in Sanskrit, himsa in Pali, is the opposite of hita. Hita is protection, welfare, well-being. So avihimsa is actually hita, where you're saying, I'll never harm anyone. That's going to be, now, obviously there'll be times when we fail, but these are the kind of thoughts that we need to constantly lean towards. These are the kind of thoughts that we need to incline ourselves to. It's interesting, in the Abhidhamma, there's a list of 7 ways by which you can gain panya. And the last one is inclining towards thoughts of wisdom. So our thoughts contain a lot of strength. And we can see that, right? Like if we are consciously filling our thinking mind with thoughts of non-sensuality, nikama, thoughts of non-alienation, avyapada, thoughts of non-harm, avihimsa, then the result is going to be a mind that carries the tone of all these things. And the mood of the mind is going to be bright, it's going to be friendly, it's going to be loving, it's going to be beautiful, right? So all these things are beautifully connected. There's not one thing that you can't connect with the other. And each one builds up over the next. Okay. So this is the kind of description of Sammaditthi and Sammasankappa in the Pali Canon. And then we come to this aspect at the end of each. So the Buddha says, there's the first noble truth, second, third, fourth. And in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, he explains the process by which he goes through all these four and what he does with all these four. So for the first noble truth, dukkha idam dukkhang ariya satcham parinyeyanti me. He says it has to be understood, right? Parinyeyanti. The fact that there is suffering has to be understood. Then dukkha samudayo ariya satcham pahatabba. It needs to be let go of. So the fact, yes, we know that there is an origin of suffering. What do we do with the origin of suffering? We're not going to hold on to it. We need to find ways and means of relaxing around it, creating space around it, letting go. Then the third one, dukkha nirodhang ariya satcham satchikatabba. Satchikatabba is you have to make it a reality. You have to bring it into being. It has to be realized. So we have to realize that there's an end of suffering. And then finally, dukkha nirodhagamini patipada, the path that leads to the end of suffering, bhavetabba, has to be cultivated, has to be nurtured, has to be cherished, has to be worked with, has to be, its welfare has to be maintained. So this is how he looks at these four noble truths, and he describes it to the five aspirants who are with him, his five friends, his initial, the five ascetics. And then as he talks about each of these things, he says, Chakkung udapadi, Jnanang udapadi, Panya udapadi, Vidya udapadi, Aloko udapadi. So I thought it's a good opportunity to kind of spend a little bit of time on all this. So Chakku is vision, right? And Chakku is basically, he says, once he understood all the four, as he went through each of the noble truths and he was working with them, and as he reached an understanding of all of these four noble truths, he describes his experience of understanding in these terms, right? So he says, vision arose. Chakku is vision. Jnana is knowledge. Panya is wisdom. Vidya, in this particular context, it is the total opposite of avidya. So there's an end, the final fetter, the 10th fetter, which is avidya, has been broken. Because he says, Vidya udapadi. Okay. Vidya arose. And finally, Aloko udapadi. Light arose. Okay. So, very often, there is a kind of understanding that all these things are similes of each other. They are kind of each of these terms can be used interchangeably. But then there's a deeper meaning, especially to jnana, panya, chakku, jnana, panya, and vidya. So chakku, we said, is vision, right? Jnana is knowledge. Panya is wisdom. Vidya is the end of ignorance. Aloka is light. Right? And light, we'll come to that in a minute. But then, before we get into the explanation, you see this picture here on the screen. And if you look at most Indian depictions, right, of any divine being, you'll always see that they're surrounded by light and they're sitting on a lotus. Can anyone tell me why? What is the meaning? What is the meaning of this symbolism? If anyone wants to speak, please put their hands up and Ashley will unmute you. Or I don't know if you can unmute yourselves, but. Sachin raised his hand. So, yeah.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So from what I understand, the lotus symbolism and lotus imagery in general has to do with the fact that lotuses can thrive in very muddy and conditions that might seem on the surface very dirty, or they're surrounded in water that's full of, potential pollutants, but yet they continue to bloom and blossom and they can thrive in such circumstances. So that I think that fits in, really well metaphorically with the Dhamma and certain teachings that, despite the surroundings that you can find yourself in, they can be a source of light and they can be a source of nourishment, even where there might not be any surrounding it.
That's you got it spot on, but that's the symbolism for the lotus itself. What about the divinity that's featured sitting on top of the lotus? So the symbolism, the meaning behind that is actually enlightenment doesn't mean just light as in driving away darkness. It just doesn't mean wisdom driving away ignorance. But there's a physical lightness that comes in. And that physical lightness comes in representative of dropping the ego, putting the burden down. So in the suttas, many suttas, the Buddha says, I have dropped the burden. I have let go of the burden. What does this indicate? It indicates a certain lightness of being. So to symbolize that it's not only light ending darkness, not only wisdom ending ignorance, it is also this letting go of the burden, letting go of the ego, letting go of the sense of self that actually makes all of us feel really, really heavy. Sometimes when the ego is at play, life feels like a drag, right? It feels burdensome. Everything feels burdensome. Why is that? It's because the ego is manifesting in such a strong way. And so when the Buddha says, I have let go of the burden, it means that there is a certain lightness of being that is experienced. Right? So that is aloka. Aloka is light, as in light of the light that ends ignorance. And at the same time, it's also the lightness of being, which is the dropping of ego, dropping of the burden, being released from the burden. So then, what about the others? Chakku, Jnana, and Panya. And Vidya, we said, is the cessation. Prajna. So, Jna is to know. So, Jnana, the word Jnana in this context is knowing. And hence it is referred to as knowledge. Panya is prajna, knowing in a special way. So, we'll come to that. And then Chakku is the vision. So, what this is a kind of a hypothesized model that I like to play around with, right? So Chakku is actually the vision, right? Vision arose. So what is vision? Vision is nothing but aligned view and aligned thoughts. All of these, that is Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, that go into the ending, align towards the ending of suffering. So this is a vision. Now, then what happens as we live life? There are many, many experiences, right? And these experiences are called anubhava. So chakku plus anubhava, which is vision plus experience, gives rise to knowledge, right? Every time we have an experience and this experience enters our field of awareness, there's something we take away from that experience, right? And then, so that's called jnana. And then panya is actually, what do you do with this knowledge that we take away from experience of life? We have to include that with samma vayama. What is samma vayama? It's just looking at all the wholesome qualities that have arisen in the mind, encouraging those, allowing those to flourish, looking at all the negative qualities that have arisen, and finding ways of letting go of them. So all the time aligned to the wholesome, moving away from the unwholesome, going towards the wholesome, moving away from the unwholesome. So whenever there's knowledge of something that arises, immediately we look at it. And this is wisdom, isn't it? We look at it and then we try and bring in a sense of discernment. What are we discerning? We are discerning whether this is wholesome or unwholesome. If it's wholesome, we embrace it. If it's unwholesome, we find ways and means of letting go. So that's panya. And finally, vijja is the ending of all traces of ignorance, letting go of that last and final fetter. And this happens with the fruition of sila, samadhi, and panya, which is morality, ethics, combined with a silent, contented, collected heart, chitta, and finally a sense of discernment that always moves towards the wholesome, letting go of the unwholesome. Right? So this is a model that I wanted to kind of leave with you. So when you have time, you can kind of go deeper into it, and you can send me your comments. Okay. So then we are going a little deeper into this aspect of panya. Sorry, Karen raised her hand. Yes, Karen. Now what
Can
do
you
I
hear,
do?
can you
Yes,
hear
I
me,
can hear
Venerable?
you.
Okay.
Yes.
Venerable, based on your last slide,
Hmm.
at which point does the fulcrum become evident? Because it seems to me like at this point, there is still a position. When you're taking a position of not to do something or to do something, seems to be a position
Yeah,
still, isn't it?
I don't understand. What?
When you say a fulcrum is all
Hmm.
aware, or something that someone who's aware of everything and not sticking to a position, how do you, at which point does the fulcrum become evident in this five facets of pure knowing?
To me,
Mm-hmm.
it's evident right through. Because the first thing is, this is not linear. These are just experiences, ways of the Buddha kind of talking about his experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Chakku, Jnana, Panya, Vijja, Aloka, all of these arose, right? So it's not that these are linear. These are different aspects of his experience, but he's giving emphasis to certain things that are coming up. So I think, so especially when I say we move towards the wholesome and we try and let go of the unwholesome, is that what makes you think that we are taking a position?
Sort of, yes, because good is good only from the position of someone who thinks it's good. So I'm just wondering, how does that work in not holding a
Well,
position?
so again, what I would like to suggest is you're getting wholesome and unwholesome mixed up with right and wrong, good and bad.
Mm, mm, mm. Okay. I see
So
where
you
you're
have to go into the idea of wholesome and unwholesome, right? Which was clarified, I think, in week 2, maybe week 1 or week 2, where we spoke of kusala and akusala.
So what you're saying is wholesome and unwholesome is undisputed.
No, no, I'm not saying it's undisputed. It is the result of discernment and discretion.
Okay. Okay. I have to go back and
Okay,
take a look at that then.
so the broad definition is that anything that is of benefit to me and at the same time that is of benefit to others is wholesome. Anything that is harmful to me and at the same time harmful to others is unwholesome.
Mm.
Okay, so now this is very different from a right and wrong, because I can experience, feel, see whenever anger arises in me, it's not helping me, it's not helping those around me. We react to that and we say I'm right or I'm wrong. So that right or wrong is a secondary reaction. So whether it's wholesome or unwholesome is something pre.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, thank you for the question. That's a beautiful question. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Right. So is there a follow-up or are you good, Karen?
I'm good. I'm good. That was very, very good because for a moment, I couldn't see the clarification on the fulcrum aspect because I've always thought that the 5 aspects of pure knowing was like a sun rising because you start with vision and then it gradually becomes, full midday sun. But I never saw it as the way you described it, and I had to clarify whether, wholesome and unwholesome was in the way good and bad was being portrayed. But I love the fact that you actually went back to the discernment aspect. So that really clarified it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And like I said, this is just me playing around with ideas, right? So that's why I said this is a hypothesized model. You can't find any of this in the canon or something. This is just the understanding that arises within me. So I'm just putting it out as an idea. So please treat it as such. Treat it as the wild imaginings of a young monk. That's it, nothing more. Okay. So then when we look at the word panya, another question that I'm frequently asked, right, is, Bhante, what is the difference between jnana, sanya, vijnana, panya? Okay, all these words, they sound the same. Is there a kind of difference? Well, actually, it's a very good question, and I thought it's good to touch upon this right now, because it's important to get this clarified. So the root of all of these words is nya. Nya is just a bare knowing. Okay. So when there is an experience or an object that comes into this bare knowing, we call it jnana, because we know something, right? So not just pure knowing, it's pure knowing into which something has arisen. Could be an experience or an object, right? Now, to that, or with that, we store it in our memory, right? First of all, we perceive it in a certain way, and the way we perceive it is colored by the conditioning that we have, and then we store it in our memory. So every time, so if I see an apple once, and as a child I'm told this is an apple, I look at the apple and I say an apple is either red, green, or yellow. It's usually round. It usually has a firm feel. It has a certain weight. And if I bite into it, I get a certain taste. Right? Through the senses, I do an evaluation. Once I do that evaluation, then it's recorded in my memory. So every time the next time I see an apple, I immediately know it's an apple. I don't have to go through that evaluative process again. So there's a recall. Okay, this is what we call Sangha. So that Nya, that pure knowing, and that Jnana, onto that Jnana, I am attaching another layer. And this layer that I attach is based on my conditioning, my memories, and then I store that somewhere, and then I can pull it out whenever I want. This is Sangha. Vijnana is actually the consciousness of that. So there is pure knowing. In the pure knowing, something arises, an object or an experience. I then compare it to my memory bank and I perceive it in a certain way. Then there is an evaluation of that particular thing. There is a consciousness of its probably its value, its form, its shape, whether it's pertinent in this moment or not, whether it's valuable in this moment or not. And I'll give you an example, it will become clearer. So there's jnana, then there's sangha, then there's vijnana, which is knowing of that memory recall, knowing of that comparison. And finally, there's panya. So panya kind of encompasses vijnana and sangha. So there's a beautiful example that Buddhaghosa gives in the Visuddhimagga. He says, let's say there's a child, and this child finds a coin, right, on the ground. Now the child doesn't know what it is. It sees something shiny. This child will go and it'll pick it up. Maybe it'll start playing with it or put it in its mouth and bite it or throw it away or whatever. Right? Now, for the child, the interaction with that coin is purely on the sensory level. That is sangha. Now, let's say an adult finds this coin. The adult, of course, sure, has a sensory experience of it. The adult knows it. He touches it, picks it up. He or she touches it, picks it up. But he or she also knows that this is a medium of exchange. And so they are conscious of its use and they are conscious of its value. That is vijnana, right? So that is the second level where there is a sensory evaluation and then there's an evaluation based on value. So this here, the word vijnana is used slightly differently than vijnana and the five aggregates. Okay, so please don't get confused. It's not the same term, the context, but it's the same word, but the context is different. So here, vijnana actually refers to an added layer on top of sangha. Then, let's say the same coin goes into the hands of a treasurer, Bandagarika. Now, this treasurer will have the sangha, will have the tactile experience of that coin. Like the adult, a regular adult, would be conscious that this is a mode of exchange and at the same time it has a certain value. But then he would also know whether this coin is counterfeit or real, whether this coin is actually, which kingdom this coin is forged in, whether this coin is made of, what kind of alloy is it? Is it pure silver? Is it copper and gold mixed? Is it silver and gold mixed? What kind? So he has a deeper level of knowing. So panya is like that, right? So panya is something that looks at a sensory experience and then evaluates its value and then it knows. So it's knowing something deeply. So that's why in most of the canonical, in most of the commentarial literature, this is how panya is kind of described, and it fits quite well. So why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this particularly because Panya is different from knowledge. Right? So many people think, oh, if I read more suttas, then I get more Panya. If I go very deep into the Abhidhamma, I study more of the Abhidhamma, I get Panya. Not really. What you're gaining is jnana, which is knowledge, right? Panya is wisdom. It is, you take that knowledge and then you apply it with a sense of discrimination. So it is a kind of deeper level. So using this, I just wanted to exhibit that Panya is different to knowledge. So then what is Panya? What is wisdom versus, or what is the difference between wisdom and knowledge? First thing is that it's not a product of learning. It's not a product of thinking either. So the picture here is Manjushri Bodhisattva. I just love these images, right? So I put them up. So most people, I don't know, like it's not a common thing in Theravada too, but I just love it. Anyway, not a product of learning, not a product of thinking, it is a product of stillness and cultivation. And we'll look at this later. So prajna, the word pra actually means before, actually means deep, right? So it's not even, it's a pre-knowing. It's a very nascent kind of knowing. And in that nascent kind of knowing, it is, because it's nascent, there is a kind of spontaneity that arises, right? And so Panya actually comes out when we are very, very still, when we are very, very silent. It does not really come out when we are busy kind of pulling apart concepts, when we are busy planning, when we are busy studying, when we are busy memorizing. Panya doesn't arise then. Okay, so we'll talk more about it as we go along. Another really good aspect of Panya is that it is the most appropriate response. Appropriate to what? Appropriate to time and place and situation. So something happens, and instead of reacting to it habitually, we kind of pause and then we respond. And we know, wow, that was wise. I did something really wise here. Right? Now, this is not the result of something I learned. This is the result of my waiting. This is the result of that moment of silence, that moment of stillness, that moment of disengaging, the moment where the ego and the thinking mind are they're just silent for a moment. And then something comes up. And sometimes we're really shocked. Like, wow, I'm surprised I did that. I'm surprised I said that. Right? But that turned out really well. Yeah, that's wisdom. And like I said before, because it's a product of stillness and cultivation, it's spontaneous. And it balances and directs the indriyas. So again, any introduction to Theravada will be incomplete if we don't talk about the 5 hindrances and the 5 spiritual faculties. So Panya balances the indriyas. We'll look at what the indriyas are, and we'll look at how Panya balances them. Okay, so we'll come to this first and then go to the previous slide. So in the Buddha's teachings, there are certain things called the hindrances. Okay, there are 5 hindrances. And we normally, the Pali word for that is nivarana. And we normally translate it as a hindrance. Okay, but then the word hindrance kind of gives it a weight and a sense of reality that it doesn't actually have. Right? The word nivarana is a very light screen. Right? It's a very thin, it's a screen that's made out of thin, transparent fabric. So for sure, it obscures vision. But more than it being something heavy, permanent, weighty, it's something that's more kind of confusing, that obscures the clarity of vision, right? And it's important to keep that in mind, because very often the moment people talk about hindrances, there's a weight to it. I have the 5 hindrances are really strong in me. And somehow that diminishes the value of their practice, it diminishes confidence. Whereas if you look at it this way, it's just a thin screen. It's just something that's cloudy, that's obstructing the vision. Then there's the opportunity of just gently moving the screen away, instead of grappling with this thing called the hindrance, right? So the 5 hindrances: kama chanda, fascination with anything that is through the senses. So it's ordered in a different way here, and you'll see why. The second one is vyapada, feeling of alienation, feeling of ill will. Then there's tina middha, a feeling of heaviness, sleepiness, drowsiness, usually translated as sloth and torpor. Then there's uddacha kukucha, which is restlessness and worry. And finally, the most insidious of it all, vichikicha, which is doubt. Okay. So there are these 5 things that come and cloud our mind. And they're easy enough to identify, except for vichikicha, which can be a little more insidious. So then the Buddha says, yes, these things are there, they come and cloud the mind. But you have, just as there are 5 of these screens that come and obstruct your vision, you can use certain faculties that you can cultivate or develop that can remove these screens, right? That act as counters to these screens. So the counter measure of the nivarana are the indriyas. The indriyas are saddha, virya, sati, samadhi, panya. Saddha, the first one is faith. We have spoken about this earlier. Faith or confidence, commitment, dedication, however you want to call it. Virya, putting in a sense of vigor. It's very, very closely related to samma vayama, which is right effort, right? Attuned effort. So constantly moving towards the wholesome, pulling back, pulling away from the unwholesome. Virya, that's the effort. Sati, which is the mindfulness aspect, which knows everything, which holds everything. Samadhi, a collectedness of heart. Panya, wisdom, which we just spoke about. So a good analogy is to actually look at the 5 indriyas. If you look at a car, right? If you start a car, you need a spark plug. Saddha is the spark plug, right? Because that's what causes the ignition. So saddha is the thing that starts. Like, unless you have confidence, unless you have an enthusiasm, unless you have a commitment, you can't do anything. Having just the spark plug is not enough. We need fuel. We need petrol. Virya is the fuel. Sati is the thing that holds the whole thing together. So it's the kind of chassis of the vehicle, right? It holds the axle, it holds the body, it holds the seats, holds the tires, the brakes, the engine, everything. Samadhi is like our kind of speed breaker. What am I saying? Speed breaker. Shock absorber. Something that cushions the ride. Because samadhi, that's what samadhi does. It kind of cushions, comforts. It gives us a sense of collectedness, right? And panya is the steering wheel, because it drives us. It actually gives us the direction. So when you look at these set of 5 things, sati is actually the fulcrum. coming back to our favorite word. Because this is the thing that holds everything together. This is the thing that is actually the container of it all. Then you have two pairs, and each of these, one is an activation, the other is a calming. This is how the Buddha has structured it. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So Saddha is an activating thing. What balances Saddha? Panya, wisdom. Without wisdom, Saddha can become blind faith. It can become superstition. Right? Without Saddha, Panya can become dry, indifferent, cynical. So Saddha moistens Panya. Panya kind of tamps down Saddha. Hey, there, don't jump up too much. Bring in a little bit of discretion. So you have an activating element, a balancing element. Again, the next, you have Virya and Samadhi. They act in the same way. Virya is energy. So there's a lot of energy, right? We get restless. So we get restless, we can't sit, there's too much going on. So what do we need to counter that? We need a collectedness, the mind and the heart. Well, the mind has to get collected and kind of sink down to the silence and stillness of the heart. So when there's excess energy, Samadhi brings in a level of comfort, brings in a level of pacification, brings in a level of pacification in a very positive sense, not in a negative sense, brings in serenity, tranquility. Now, if there's too much Samadhi, what happens is we can fall asleep, right? Or there's no scope for any kind of investigation, reflection, contemplation. So Virya assists with that. So here, Virya is the activating element, Samadhi is the pacifying element. So you have these two pairs, two activating elements, two pacifying elements, all held together by Sati. And Panya is the one that actually balances everything. So Panya harmonizes and balances. So it is the thing that brings in a sense of discernment. So then, what it does is Saddha actually is the counter to doubt. Right? So Vichikiccha is doubt. It doesn't in the canon. Usually, it says Vichikiccha is described as doubting the Buddha, doubting the Dhamma, doubting the Sangha. True, very true. But in a meaningful day-to-day life, right? It's a sense of vacillation. It's a sense of, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Or shouldn't I? Habit of procrastination. That is how procrastination is a manifestation of Vichikiccha, right? Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Should I go now? Shouldn't I go now? Should I have 1 cup of tea? Should I have 2 cups of tea? So this constant kind of moving between this and the other. Saddha actually is the faculty that brings in a sense of confidence. And because Saddha is combined with a sense of discretion, which is Panya, removes this sense of vacillation. Right? So I know, right? I want to sit and meditate, I'm sitting and meditating. I want to go out and work, I'm going to go out and work. If I want to go out for a walk, I know I'm going to go out for a walk. No sense of vacillation. Tina Middha, again, this kind of sloth and torpor. Obviously, the counter to that is Virya, bringing in a sense of energy. The petrol, that makes the car move. Vyapada, ill will, the counter is Sati. A sense of recollection, sense of mindfulness, just being aware of it. And with Vyapada, very often, the recognition itself is the release. The moment I know, there's ill will, I'm separating myself, immediately it goes away, right? Unless it's very deep. Generally speaking, if we catch it early enough, recognition itself is the release. Restlessness and worry, uddhacha kukucha. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the head. there are problems, there are worries. Because of that, it physically manifests as really restless feeling in the body, a sense of unease with everything. So we collect the chitta. Right? That pacifies the whole thing. And then, of course, kamachanda, constantly going out, constantly going out. The mind going out is the cause. The result of the mind going out is suffering. Mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. That's panya. Right? So kamachanda, the counter of kamachanda is panya. So a little bit of talking of nivarana and indriya. This is again a very high level approach, but can't do more than this. So then how does panya manifest in daily life? Well, first of all, like we said, it's a response, not a reaction, right? That's something we have to bear in mind. So if we do something, we react habitually, and it leaves a kind of bad feeling and a bad result. We know, okay, this is not something that's done out of panya, right? This is something done out of habitual ignorance. It's very appropriate to time and place. We already spoke about that. It's guided by samadhi, because ditti provides the direction. It's strengthened by sati. It's held by sati. Panya, sati is the mindfulness aspect of it. Panya is the discernment aspect of it, right? And of course, the result is that it fosters, strengthens both ethical behavior as well as mental cultivation, cultivation of collectedness, fostering silence, all of that. Tempers, balances, and restraints. Like we said, like how it acts with the indriyas and how it acts with the nivaranas. It tempers, balances, and restraints. Right? And of course, it leads to clarity, acceptance, and reflection. So when we spoke about sila, we said that the litmus test is that if life becomes blameless and becomes easeful, then we know that we are progressing in sila. We are understanding sila. We are living sila in a right way. If serenity, contentedness, a sense of deep contentment increases in life, then we know samadhi is kind of working. We're doing something proper that is allowing samadhi to manifest. Similarly, manifestation of panya is a level of clarity. Right? There's a mental clarity. So we are able to kind of look at things in a more clear manner. We are not obscured by views. We are not obscured by opinions. We are not obscured by habit. Right? There is a deep acceptance that comes with panya. Because panya by itself it has a discerning quality, but in that discernment, there's a deep acceptance. Panya doesn't, everything comes into consciousness, everything comes into awareness. And then there's a discernment that acts, right? And we are accepting of what we think is wholesome, just moving away from what we think is unwholesome. But that moving away is not a pushing out. We are just we're not going to engage with it. So there is a deep sense of acceptance. And everything that we do in daily life is the result of reflection. So reflection, contemplation, all these things automatically increase. Okay? So these are the litmus tests for panya in daily life. So now we come to another. So before we move on to the next, this is the slide that we spoke about. Sati is the fulcrum and how these aspects kind of balance. Okay. So before we come to the next part, which is again an important aspect of Theravada frame of the Theravadan framework. Are there any questions before we move on, especially related to the Panya aspect? No? Okay, great. So then we're going to now talk about something called the jhanas. Okay, and this is important because without having a clear understanding of what jhanas are, we can't approach the idea of shamatha meditation and vipassana meditation. Okay, and I'm sure you all looked at some of the reading from last week or the week before even. No, probably last week, where there is the teaching on the Noble Eightfold Path, and it says, what it goes through each aspect. What is Sammadati? What is Samma Sankappa? Da, 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 da. Finally ends with what is Samma Samadhi. And there the Buddha says, Samma Samadhi is when, someone, he's saying in that, he says when a monk, but could be anyone, when anyone enters the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, is Samma Samadhi. So Samma Samadhi, the way the Buddha describes it in the suttas, is no different from the four jhanas. So then the question arises, what is jhana? And then there are many explanations. There are many, many explanations. Jhana is this and jhana is that. And then there are some versions that are totally contradictory, and our head starts spinning. We don't know, like, what the hell is this? We have no idea. So I thought it's useful to kind of understand that aspect. First of all, we have to understand that the meaning of the word jhana has evolved over time, just as many words do, right? What would be a good example in English? So the word terrific, right? Today we use the word terrific to mean something that's fantastic, something that's fabulous, but originally it meant something that was frightening, right? And even today, actually, if you look at the dictionary meaning of the word terrific, it would say it's something that is terrifying, something that has that is associated with a state of terror, right? But in common usage, it's something fantastic. Oh, how was the movie? Oh, it was terrific. How was that restaurant? It was terrific. You weren't really scared there, right? You're actually saying it was brilliant. It was fantastic. So that's how the meaning of words evolve over time. Similarly, when the Buddha used the word jhana, what he was referring to is different to say when we come to the time of the commentaries, especially when we come to the time of the Visuddhimagga, right? Because that's where, so 5th century AD was a particularly tumultuous time in the spiritual landscape of India, right? So whether it's in Buddhism or Jainism or in the Vedic schools, there was a lot going on. There were lots of debates. There was a lot of intermingling, intermixing. Some schools borrowed some ideas, other schools borrowed, there was this huge kind of exchange going on. So the 5th century AD, we see something called the Patanjali Yoga Sutras coming up. The Patanjali Yoga Sutras has something called the Ashtanga Marga, which is very similar to the Arya Attangika Magga, the Noble Eightfold Path that the Buddha speaks about, but it's quite different. In that in the Ashtanga Marga, the last aspect is Samadhi. Just like how in our Attangika Magga, Arya Attangika Magga, when we look at it in the Dhamma Chakkapavatana Sutta, Samma Samadhi is the last. Here also Samadhi is the last. And here Samadhi is described in a sense that is picked up by Acharya Buddhaghosa and is described in a certain way. Right? So it's different to how the Buddha describes it. And we'll talk about how it's different. But at the moment, it's enough to say that jhana, when you look at it from the canonical sense, has a certain meaning, has a certain connotation. Jhana, when you look at it from the commentarial standpoint, has a different meaning and a different connotation. Now, what is the problem? Well, the problem is around the 5th century, that's when people started saying, you don't need the jhanas for awakening. Now everyone is stunned. What? You don't need jhanas for awakening? They said, no, you just need insight and you can awaken. So then what the hell's going on? Are the suttas wrong? Is the Buddha wrong? And so today when we hear these two, we're kind of stunned. Then who's right? Right? Well, again, move away from right and wrong, go to the fulcrum. Both are right in their own respects. And we'll try and understand how both are right in their own respects. So meaning has evolved over time, used differently in the suttas and the commentary. In its broadest sense, jhana, Pali, dhyana, Sanskrit just means meditation. Okay? It's closely related to the words samadhi and samatha. Bhante Gunaratana, Bhante G. I think his explanation of any ideas touching on samadhi are kind of the most lucid, the most readable, the most easy to understand. So he says, because jhana and samadhi lead to something called serenity, right? In that sense, they're very similar. But samadhi has a broader usage and a broader connotation. Samatha means anything that pacifies, anything that brings in tranquility. I'm not going to say anything that tranquilizes, anything that brings in tranquility, okay, is samatha. It obviously helps in developing serenity. So this is a very high level view of jhana. So now let's get a little deeper. So what is the sutta perspective and what is the commentarial perspective? And once we go through these points, we would be able to appreciate the 2 points of view. First of all, when you look at the suttas, it is 100% essential, 100% clear that jhana is essential for awakening. Because Samma Samadhi is described as the 4 jhanas. And without Samma Samadhi, one part of the Noble Eightfold Path is missing. So if someone says jhanas are not needed for awakening, it's not, it's wrong, actually, according to the Sutta perspective. Now, according to the commentarial perspective, it says jhanas are not necessary, just dry insight is necessary. And I'm saying that in a sense, they are right. And we'll see why or how. So first of all, in the Pali, in the canon, in the suttas, it says jhana is described as a chetaso ekodibhavam. It is a unification of the chitta. Okay, it's a unification. So it's a collectedness. The mind is not scattered. In the commentaries, it says this is a one-pointed concentration fixed on a single object. Can you appreciate the difference here? The suttas say, Chetaso Eko Dibhava. You sit down, you close your eyes, you're meditating, and the mind starts collecting. Right? Visuddhimagga, on the other hand, says you have to choose an object first, and then this object, you have to be one-pointed on that object. So you have to kind of push everything else away, right? And then you have to concentrate on this. Okay? So obviously the difference now becomes very clear. According to the suttas, there's heightened awareness of the body and of changing phenomena. The Buddha says in all of the 4, Atapi Sampajano Satima. Atapi, with a sense of dedication, we have to warm up to it. Atrapyata in Sanskrit. The root is tapa, which is the same as tapas. Tapas is like heat, burning off. So atapi is you're warming up to something. So you're warming up to your object of meditation. Atapi, sampajana, knowing it clearly, knowing it well. Satima, with mindfulness, holding this in mind. Atapi sampajana. So because there's sampajanya, because there's clear comprehension, there's clear knowing, obviously there is a heightened awareness of whatever is going, all the phenomena that are going on. In the midst of that chetaso ekodibhava, so the mind is collected, it's serene, it's still. In the midst of that stillness, there is a heightened awareness. Right? But then the commentaries say when you're in jhana, there's no experience of body, there's no experience of any phenomena. You don't notice any change. So in another manner, you're just totally absorbed. Right? And in the Pali Suttas, it says insight occurs along with jhana. So the Buddha says, when there's stillness, when there's deep silence, when there's collectedness, insight arises. Right? Rinpoche's famous example of how there's a water body that's very, very still, it's very silent, then all these animals come to drink from that water body. So you just sit, you wait, everything is still, all these animals come to drink. So there's stillness, and all of these insights keep arising from that stillness. The commentarial perspective is that you have to get into this kind of absorption, deep state of absorption, and then you have to come out of it. And only after you come out of it can insight arise. You can have insight only when you come out of the jhana. Okay? The suttas refer to the jhanas as mental action. So it is something that we are doing. The commentaries refer to it as a mental state. Right? So again, you can appreciate one thing, it's a cultivation, it's an action, it's a doing, it's a practice. The other thing, it's a kind of state that needs to be achieved. In the suttas, it's very clear. The Buddha says the act of meditation is primary. Whereas in the commentaries, the object of meditation is primary. So if your object is a kasina, if your object is the breath, if your object is whatever, kayagata sati, whatever it is, whatever your object is, that object becomes primary. Actually, mostly breath. If kayagata sati would mean vedana, sensation, that goes into the realm of vipassana. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, act of meditation or meditating is primary in the sutta perspective. The object of meditation is primary in the jhana perspective. It's possible while moving about. The suttas, the Buddha is very clear. There are 4 postures: standing, sitting, walking, and lying down. There are numerous examples of how all of these arahants are able to get in jhana 1, 2, 3, 4. They can pick and choose. They can go from 1 to 4. They can come from 4 to 1. Or they can jump. They can do 1, 3, 2, 4, 4, 1, 3, 2. Name the combination, they can do it. And they can do it when they are standing, sitting, walking, and lying down. So please note this. It's very, very important. It's a very important point. Possible when moving about, possible in different postures. In the commentarial perspective, this is not possible. Jhanas are not possible when someone is moving about. Now, in the sutta perspective, because there's so much emphasis on sati and sampajanya, there's no chance for a spiritual bypass. Spiritual bypass is an alternate kind of state of mind where you disconnect with reality and you get stuck in a very pleasant state. What would you say, Curtis? Is it a psychological state bypass? Curtis is a psychologist, professor of psychology.
I don't know what spiritual bypass is.
I guess I would imagine it being some kind of suppression or repression
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
of undesirable states or memories.
Yeah, that's how Kabat-Zinn kind of refers to it too. It's a repression of something, and then that takes someone into a very created, convoluted, unnatural, synthetic state of wellness, and they kind of revel in that. So they get some kind of release, but the roots are not taken care of. Right? The problem still exists, and the problems keep getting exacerbated. That's spiritual bypass. Okay. So because in the sutta perspective, there's so much of emphasis on sati and sampajanya, there's no chance of a spiritual bypass. But in the commentarial perspective, there's an actual description of a state very similar to spiritual bypass. Right? And it very specifically states that the kilesas have to be suppressed. So thank you for bringing up that idea of suppression, right? So when you read the commentaries, it says that during jhana, all the kilesas have to be suppressed. In the sutta perspective, samadhi is not categorized. The Buddha just talks of one samadhi. But in the commentarial perspective, there are three categories of samadhi. We're not going to go into that, right? There's parikamma samadhi, then there's upachara samadhi, then there's apana samadhi, all of that. We're not going to go into the details, but it's enough to say that samadhi has three categories. So just out of these kind of basic, high level points of difference, we are able to bring in an understanding that what the Buddha means when he uses the word jhana is very different to what the commentaries refer to when they are speaking of jhana. And this difference is because of how the word has changed over time and about ideas that existed in the culture at that time, especially with the upsurge of Ayurveda, with the upsurge of the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, with the upsurge of a lot of tantric work, right? Kularnava Tantra and all of these different tantras that come with Shakti worship. So because of all this, a lot of ideas have been borrowed, and for whatever reason, the commentarial perspective is this. Now, so in a sense, so now where is the reconciliation? So in my understanding, everyone definitely needs jhana as described in the sutta perspective, right? Because it's so gentle, it's approachable, it's doable, it's kind, and you can see it in action. Whereas the commentarial perspective, this kind of jhana, which is a fixed concentration on one single object, where you go into this kind of altered state where everything disappears, this really is not needed for enlightenment, for awakening. Okay, so when you hear someone saying jhana is not needed for awakening, then the question is, what do you mean by jhana? That's how we can stay in the fulcrum. And then we can actually understand whether they're, because most people are confused. Not very many people know or have the clarity to figure out that this is how jhana is described in the suttas, this is how the jhana is described in the commentaries. You'll hear just these kind of comments being flippantly passed, right? And if you ask them, what is jhana? How do you, are you referring, where are you're referring to the suttas? Are you referring to the commentaries? I don't know, but I know, I've been told you don't need jhanas for awakening. Okay. So again, just to emphasize, the commentarial idea of jhana is certainly not needed for awakening. The sutta idea of jhana is needed for awakening. Right? And It is not this kind of rarefied, deified, almost impossible state that only 1 in a million can achieve. In fact, I think in the Visuddhimagga, it is stated that only 1 in 100 times 100 can actually reach the level of the jhanas. You know, anyway, so moving on, let's look at some of the things that some masters, some great teachers have to say. So this is what Luang Por Chah said on absorption samadhi. Absorption samadhi is one very particular kind of samadhi that the commentaries refer to. That which can be most harmful to the meditator is absorption samadhi, in brackets jhana. The samadhi with deep, sustained calm. Please keep in mind that he's speaking in Thai. This has been translated in English. So some of the things may seem a little quizzical, but as we complete it, you'll get the gist. This samadhi brings great peace. Where there's peace, there's happiness. When there's happiness, attachment and clinging to that happiness arise. The meditator doesn't want to contemplate anything else here. He wants to indulge in that pleasant feeling. Right? So he's talking of appana samadhi, this absorption samadhi. He is not talking of jhanas from the sutta perspective. He's talking of jhanas from the commentarial perspective. When we have been practicing for a long time, we may become adept at entering the samadhi very, very quickly. As soon as we start to note our meditation object, the mind enters calm, and we don't want to come out to investigate anything. We just get stuck on that happiness. This is a danger to one who is practicing meditation. This comes in the book, A Taste to Freedom, where he's particularly talking about upachara samadhi, appana samadhi. Another quote by Luang Por Chah, if your mind is peaceful, it's kind of like still flowing water. That's where discernment can arise. And again, from his book, Still Flowing Water. And this kind of, I thought I must include this because this kind of talks to the point where in the suttas, the Buddha says that jhanas can happen in the midst of movement. Right? Okay, what's going on? Oops. And Ajahn Jeff, Ajahn Thanissaro, he says, what jhana means in the commentaries is something quite different from what it means in the canon. Because of this difference, we can say that the commentaries are right in viewing their type of jhana as unnecessary for awakening. But that awakening cannot occur without the attainment of jhana in the canonical sense. Okay. But again, my constant refrain is this. Don't worry too much about this. In the suttas, the emphasis is on the act of meditation. In the suttas, the jhanas just mean the act of meditating. Give everything you have to that. Okay, enjoy the process, enjoy the flow. Do not get caught up in the results. Because if you get caught up in the results, there's this constant doubt. Am I in jhana 1? Am I in jhana 2? Am I in jhana 3? What's going on? Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? No, no, no. Just leave all that aside. Get a sense of collectedness with the background of ease and relaxation, right? This is very, very important. A sense of relaxed awareness, which leads to a collected chitta, which then gives rise to insight automatically. Just be patient with that and enjoy the ride, really. So again, this is from a book called What You Might Know of Jhana and Samadhi by the Venerable Kumara Bhikkhu. It's a brilliant book. It's a difficult read because it's really kind of academic in nature, but he kind of says the same things, right? So when you look at the sutta map, you start with first jhana and you go past the fourth jhana. And so here, both serenity or tranquility, shamatha, it works alongside with vipassana, which is insight, right? Now, when you look at the Visuddhi Magga, you start off with Upachara Samadhi, you keep going along, and finally you'll reach Apana Samadhi, awakening. But then everything ends after the fourth jhana. So, or you go off on a tangent, and then it is only Vipassana. So you got to enter a jhana, then get out of it, and then do insight meditation. Okay. Again, really, but it's describing the same landscape using names differently. This is how it kind of changes over time. Okay. So now we come to this question. What is this Shamatha Vipassana debate? Well, this is the debate, right? Especially in a lot of Theravada schools, it's very, very prevalent. It's not so prevalent in the Thai Forest Sangha, right? But like this was a very, very prevalent thing when I was a layperson and I was doing when I was attending and doing a lot of Vipassana courses with Goenkaji's school technique. There was a lot of debate. Is Samatha meditation really needed? Are jhanas really needed? So Shamatha is serenity, anything that leads to tranquility, collectedness. And this school says jhanas are absolutely needed. Vipassana is the insight school. It says seeing in a special way. So Buddhaghosa, he describes the word Vipassana. So vi and passana. Passana, passati is to see. Vi, he says, vichayena passati iti vipassana. Visesena passati iti vipassana. So pakarena passati iti vipassana. So he says, any kind of sight or seeing in a special way, in a particular way, seeing in a way that is penetrating, that kind of divides everything, right? That is called vipassana. In general, vipassana just means seeing things as they are, right? Seeing things with clarity, seeing things as they are. So then what's the debate? The debate is, it could be one of these three things, a combination of all three, or a selection of two out of three. Which one should we do first? Should we start with samatha practices, which is generally anapanasati, or any kind of anusati practices, buddhanusati, dhammanusati, sanghanusati, devanusati, chaganusati, silanusati, maranasati, kayagata sati. These 9 anusatis that the Buddha speaks about. Should we do those practices? Should we do anapanasati? Anything that takes us to tranquility, should that be done first? Or should vipassana be done first? Which one is more important? So do you do anapanasati and then do body scanning? Or do you do body scanning and then do anapanasati? Which one is more important? Is breath, awareness of breath important, or is awareness of bodily sensations important? So this thing called dry insight, again, this is a commentarial term, which is the term that's used for someone who reaches awakening without going through the commentarial jhanas, right? Without going through the jhana, and he is called a panya vimutta. Okay, so someone who takes the jhana route is called a cheto vimutta, release through the heart, release through wisdom. Or vipassana sukha, someone who does vipassana and reaches sukha, which is the end of dukkha, end of suffering. So those aspects are called dry insight. So is dry insight enough? So these are the kind of debates that go on. But what I would like to suggest is, instead of taking a position in favor of either of these techniques, a wise way of approaching this is it really a debate, or is it more a relationship? Right? So is the question whether samatha is important or vipassana is important, is the question which has to come first? Is the question, do we need jhana or don't we need jhana? But what is the relationship of these two methods of practice with me, with my heart, with my practice, with the way I feel? So what is the relationship? Explore that. Can a bird fly with a single wing? Lumpucha would always say that both samatha and vipassana are like two wings of a bird. He says, when you sit down and meditate, if your chitta gets collected, automatically insight will arise. If and when insight arises, that insight will automatically aid, foster, strengthen that collectedness. How can you have one without the other? So the question is, can you have a bird with only one wing? And if you have a bird with only one wing, can it fly? Personal proclivities are important. There are some people who thrive doing body sensation, body scanning. Brilliant, works for them, right? They love going into the minutiae. They love going into, what the kalapas and the atta kalapas, and going into all these fine, subtle sensations, going into a pinpoint and then breaking it down further. Some people love doing that kind of work. For some people, it just doesn't work, gives them a headache. They'd rather have a broad awareness, right? An easeful abiding, and then cultivate collectedness through that. So figure out what works for you, right? So it's not a question of whether uh, what example can I give? It's not, the question is not whether Tylenol is better or Gravol is better. If I have a headache, I take Tylenol. If I feel queasy, I take Gravol. So you can't say Tylenol is better than Gravol. So if I need collectedness, if I need a pacification, if I need some kind of serenity, I'll do Anapanasati, right? If I'm already feeling really serene, then I can do body scanning. What's the big deal? So depending on whether you have a headache or you have nausea, take either the Tylenol or the Gravol. Don't debate, don't make it a problem, right? So now it's 8:13. Oh gosh. Anyway, we don't have much, so I'm actually quite happy. So please go into your breakout rooms and discuss what is your take on the Samatha Vipassana debate. Talk about anything you want to discuss about the jhanas. So it's 8:13. We'll meet back at 8:23. Then take a 5-minute break, and then 8:23 we'll meet. Thank you for your patience. See you soon. And Ashley will help with all that. Thank you, Ashley. Okay, I guess everyone's back. Are we good to start again, Ashley?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so everyone's back. So who'd like to go first? How many rooms did we have? 2 or 3?
We just had 2.
Okay, so we'll have 2 people sharing. Xavier, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Tan Amarasiri.
And yes, see you on the 19th.
Yeah, maybe I can share from our room.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll see you on the 19th.
Mm.
So our room we discussed a lot.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yeah, sure. Sorry if I don't capture what everyone said, but a lot of what we said was we talked about how, well, they kind of are both needed, and they both represent different ways of perceiving the same thing, and they kind of interbeing. I think that kind of summarizes. I don't mean to make it too short. So if anyone else wants to step in and contribute, but it's just kind of the balance of both of them and how they're both often arise together. Yeah.
Great.
I think you did a great job for our team, Xavier. Or just add that we did say that for some of us, we found that we might start with one and then move on to the other, and vice versa, depending upon how we're feeling. Sometimes one helps us focus more, other times another focuses more. So it's sort of it's nice to have that ability to be able to go back and forth between. And overall, we didn't feel that there was a debate. We felt that it was. Something that you could use of both styles.
Excellent. Excellent. That is the whole kind of forest tradition ethos. Great. Thank you, Xavier and Shobha. Okay. Anyone else?
I was appointed with speaking for breakout room 2.
Sure. Yes.
So I guess the main couple of items of discussion that our group went through revolved around that we were still trying to digest what both terms mean, especially in conversation with each other, and we all echoed that some of us might be a little bit lost when it comes to them still, or might need to rewatch some of the videos to get a deeper understanding. But the main thing that we discussed in our group was, the embodied way of understanding these things of understanding. I think Karen and Vanessa both spoke very beautifully about, the feeling of freedom and how, sometimes, not sometimes, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but how one of the goals is to learn how to replicate that and to understand what that is and to be able to bring back into these states of mind, and how sometimes understanding it from an academic point of view might not resonate with everybody, because they might in their own practice feel like they learn experientially, and that's the main way that they approach these things. So we had a pretty interesting discussion about, analytical and embodied ways of approaching these teachings and of digesting the practice. And yeah, that's if anyone in my group, wants to add anything else, please do. My brain is admittedly a little foggy at the minute, but thank you for
Okay,
listening.
great. Thank you. Thank you, Sachin. Thanks for doing that. Anyone else has any comments? Anyone would like to add on? Okay, guess not. So let's do a short 10-minute meditation, and then we can open it up for, no, please, you can do it on a chair. Oh, then we can open it up for questions, comments. Okay, so today's meditation is going to be more on an open awareness of phenomena. So kind of, if you look at the Satipatthana schematic, either Chittanusati or Dhammanusati, that is awareness of thoughts, awareness of mental phenomenon, or awareness of any phenomenon arising. So again, as we've been doing over the past, take a comfortable posture that is stable but not rigid. Just check in with the mood of the mind. Again, bringing in the intention of open, broad, non-selective, non-judgmental awareness. Or allow sound to come in to this awareness, any ambient sound. If there's no sound, there's no sound. Just be aware that there's no sound. If there's sound, be aware of the sound. So this awareness is the broad, vast, expansive field of knowing in which sounds, thoughts, sensations, everything arise and pass away. Notice that stimuli change, but the awareness doesn't. Just be with that till you hear the gong. Gentle, easeful, awake, aware. Okay. Sorry if you I noticed that in the last video no one could hear the gong. So I hope you heard the gong. Um, anyway, so that's about it. We've come to the end of the 4 weeks. So I now open up the floor for any comments or questions. But if you do have any questions that come up later, please get in touch with either Marjorie or Sachin, and they can give you my email ID, and then you can write to me. But in closing, what I'd just like to kind of bring everyone's attention to is the biggest resource that you have are the people who are with you in this. So Kalyana Mittata, feeling of community, the feeling of friendship, the feeling of wisdom, sharing of guidance, sharing of ideas, thoughts. So that's very, very important. So please kind of keep that going. It is, like the Buddha said, the whole of the holy life. So attend all your TBC meetings, attend all your online sessions, meet up with a smaller group of people, chat about the Dhamma. The more you bring in thoughts of Dhamma, like I said, in the one of the surest ways. So the Abhidhamma has 7 methods of gaining panya. The first one is asking someone who's wise. So make sure you ask anyone who you think is wise if you have any questions. Second thing, the final thing is always incline your thoughts towards the wholesome, the wise, etc. So please keep that going. So I'm pretty exhausted myself, so I have no other words of encouragement to offer at this point, but I'd be happy to keep in touch, happy to answer all your questions. So open the floor to any questions. So Sachin, please go ahead.
Hi, so just on behalf of TBC and everyone here, I would like to thank you, Tan Amarasiri, for devising this course for us and for spending time with us these 4 weeks to share your knowledge and for all the hard work that you put into making these slides and answering our questions and creating a space where we can gather and we can learn deeply all in your first session, you mentioned how Theravada is the path of the elders, and I feel like through these sessions, you're really able to bring these centuries and millennia of learning together in ways that we can understand in a way that we can add all these things together into a system that can provide a robust framework for our practice that we can look back to continually and which can enrich our experiences and can give us a way to progress if we're feeling stuck or want more ideas on how to keep moving forward. So I would like to invite all of us to join me in offering 3 bows of respect.
Sukhi Hotu. Sukhi. Sukhi.
And once again, thank you so much. And I know that though our 4 weeks together might be up, this is not the end of learning for all of us. We're blessed that we have the recordings that we can look back to, and as you just mentioned, hopefully we can continue to get together in some way and continue discussing these things and to take all of this energy and use it to build momentum. So once again, thank you on behalf of TBC and on behalf of all of us.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone. It was lovely spending time with you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening, and see you all sometime soon. Okay.
Thank you,
Have a good night.
Namaste. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.